PaperBag series. I am with your co-host, Mr. Kola Adetola.
Thank you. I'm here with your host, Mr. Brandon Lewis.
My name is Desmond Hardy, and welcome to For Your Ears Only. And today I want to talk about the newest internet sensation that I have become a devotee of, and that is a channel called Zach Morris's Trash. Why do I love this show, Zach Morris's Trash? It takes one of my favorite shows that I grew up watching, which is Saved by the Bell, and it shows consistently a history of Zach Morris being a trash human being. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are examples of Zach taking advantage of a homeless kid, taking advantage of a woman who was disabled in a wheelchair, him getting his friends hooked on drugs, narking out one of his friends to the police and dry snitching. I mean, the examples are endless. It's kind of funny, but it's also sad too, because at the same time that I'm laughing at this sort of pseudo-satirical site that plays and pokes fun at the fact that Zach Morris, who was once protagonist, is actually now a pretty shitty character, is the fact that when we look at the context of this protagonist character in light of societal standards 25 to 30 years later, it's actually quite apparent that he's a really crappy dude. What does that mean, though? It actually means that over time, societies evolve and they progress, and the things that we decide that are norms in this age can sometimes become anathema in the next. The reason I bring that up, though, is because in addition to Zach Morris's Trash, there's a beautiful documentary that's just been released by an Indian man named Hari Kondabolu called The Problem with Apu. Now, for anybody who is not cognizant of who Apu is the Indian or South Asian store clerk or store owner or clerk of a store in the Simpsons franchise. Everybody knows Apu is the friendly guy with the Indian accent who is comic relief amongst many of the other ancillary characters on the Simpsons staff. The problem with Apu is myriad, actually. Apu is actually somebody who is voiced by the main character, Hank Azaria, who's also the voice of many other Simpsons characters. But the biggest problem with that is Apu is actually voiced by a white man. In other words, Apu is an actor and is a white actor performing in comic or cartoonish blackface. And that's a problem, among many other problems. Recently, Bill Maher talked about the problem with Apu on his show, Real Time with Bill Maher, and he talked about how those from the millennial generation who look back at things that were acceptable 20 or 30 years ago and point out the inconsistencies as well as the moral issues with those are not woke, but they're just assholes. And I want to stick a firm not so fast there. There's a reason why societies progress and improve over age. Martin Luther King has a very famous quote that says, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." There is a reason why people like Apu and Hank Azaria and the entire Simpsons franchise and brain trust need to be called to account. And the reason for that is because, unlike shows like Saved by the Bell, The Simpsons is still going on today. The Simpsons is not an aspect of nostalgia. The Simpsons is a franchise based on current events. And yet, even when the documentary was released, when they had the opportunity and myriad opportunities to address the problematic nature of Apu and representation for South Asian Americans and the lack of that representation, instead of addressing those issues, what they did was mock them, and they mocked them in the most pernicious way. What do I mean by that? they actually use Lisa Simpson to mock the fact that once every generation we can look back at something that's happened that was quote unquote acceptable 20 to 30 years ago. And if it was wildly acceptable, now all of a sudden we can look back at it with hindsight being at our advantage and now begin to criticize it. The problem with that fact is Lisa is the moral compass of the entire character of the Simpsons franchise. Lisa has been at the cutting edge of feminism, racial equality, income inequality, animals' rights, as well as conservationism. And yet, the makers of Simpsons knew exactly what they were doing by using Lisa Simpson to now begin to use this inverted type of victim complex to shame the people who are actually bringing forth valid criticisms to the Simpsons franchise. The reason I bring this up is because none of us are immune from having this mentality. We've got to get to a point where we are open to realizing that 20, 30, 50, maybe 80 years from now, society is going to move and progress to a level to where the things that we think are harmless or benign are actually quite problematic. Yes, we already know about mass incarceration. We already understand about Black Lives Mattering. We understand white privilege. But there are many aspects of society that we think are totally fine and harmless that may be major shockers in the next age and generation. Let's not be like the Simpsons, who looks for a way to excuse ourselves by saying, hey, 20 years ago it was okay, so let's not look for a reason to criticize ourselves. No, let's make sure that we're open to that criticism and say, hey, we didn't make all the right choices in this generation, but by God, we want to give you enough tools in the next generation to where you can take the baton and move culture forward so that more people have representation, more people have say, and more people feel safe, and more people have equality in this so-called land of the free. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm Desmond Hardy, and this is For Your Ears Only.